Welcome to the Helping Families Be Happy podcast, where we explore the often messy world of family, love, and relationships. I'm your host for this podcast, Adina Oberman, a mom, former preschool teacher, picture book lover, and member of the Familias marketing team. I'm also the creator of Big Books for Little Hands, a site dedicated to connecting parents and teachers, the best books for the ups and downs of life with little ones. We welcome today's guest, Dr. Tamara Girardi. Award-winning author, Dr. Tamara Girardi writes books for children and teens. Her published titles include the Amazon editor's pick, Why Daddy Why, and its newly released companion, Why Mommy Why, coming March 2025. Two more titles, Why Grandma Why and Why Grandpa Why, will follow in the series on Grandparents' Day 2027. Tamara has published 6 YA titles in 2 different series with Wise Wolf Books. Gridiron Girl, which tells the story of Julia Medina, a high school senior who quits playing volleyball to compete against her boyfriend for the starting quarterback position on the football team, kicks off the Iron Valley Vikings series that includes other titles, Disorder on the Court, Ultimate Takedown, and Shot Through the Heart. Above the Fold is the first book in Tamara's second series, all about teens exploring their dreams and their true selves through exhibits at a popular Mardi Gras-esque hotspot called Carnivalesque. Also an academic, Tamara is a college English professor. She lives in a suburb of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania with her husband, 4 adorably rambunctious children, and an even wilder German Shepherd. This episode aligns with the Familias habits, love together and read together. You can learn more about the Familias 10 Habits of Happy Families by going to the Habit Hub blog on familias.com. Welcome, Tamara. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you to Familias for believing in these books. I just love working with you all.
Thank you so much. We're so grateful to you. We know that putting your story in the hands of other people is a very personal thing, and we know it's a big deal, and we take it seriously. So thank you for trusting us with your stories.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And since we're talking about your stories, I want our listeners who might be new to learn a little bit more about the Why series. So give us a little taste of Why Mommy Why and Why Daddy Why, which is the next in the series.
Yeah, thank you. I have 4 children, as you said, and I started writing Why Daddy Why when my daughter Gabriella was 4. And it just really celebrates the inquisitive nature of children and the many questions that they ask. So it was really interesting for me when I started working on Why Mommy Why, because there's only a few questions in the book, a handful, but it was very challenging to choose the right questions. So now that we have 2 books out, the daddy book and the mommy book, I wanted to build some connections between the 2, but then also bring in new twists or new questions, new answers, all tying back to the love relationship between the mommy and the cub, of course. So the first question in the book, in both books, it's different, but the answers are the same. And I love that about the stories. In Why Daddy Why, the cub asks, Daddy, why are your arms so much longer than mine, Daddy, why? And in the mommy book, the cub asks, why are you so strong, Mommy, why? And I'll show it to you because it's so beautiful. And it's so beautiful. The illustrations are beautiful. And so the answer to both questions is so I can scoop you up into the biggest, best bear hugs. And this was really important to me to include hugs in both books because some people may know this. It seems common sense in a lot of ways, but hugs just carry so much power. When we have these really busy days with our kids, we're overstimulated. Hugs, by research, we know that they can reduce stress. They can improve your immune system. They can help your cardiovascular health. They can reduce fears. They're just very powerful. So I wanted to include hugs to start off both books, which is pretty exciting for me that we have that connection in both. Also, something that's really important to me is childhood literacy. So I remember when Why Daddy Why first came out and the editorial team asked me, is there anything that's really important to you for the illustrations? And as authors, we really want to make space for illustrators to put their own creative vision on the text. So I didn't want to impose too much, but I just asked for one thing. I asked if they could make it look magical So in both books, we see the cub and daddy and mommy reading together. And I'll show you the magic and why daddy, why. So we see this beautiful illustration. I just love how the illustrator for this book demonstrated magic. And I'm actually not going to show the why, mommy, why. I'm going to let that be a surprise. But there's also that kind of magical moment of them curling up and reading together. And when I visit schools and classrooms, I always talk to the students about the importance of literacy. And I talk to them about how special and magical it can be for them to sit down and curl up and read with their loved ones. I just love that parents that know why, daddy, why are going to see some of those similarities, but we also have kind of a few little twists too. And since the questions were so difficult, I know some people think a children's book is just so much easier to write than an adult book, but I feel like there has to be absolute perfection with every word that you select when there's so few words. And I went to the expert on this one. So my youngest son is 6, but he was 4 around the time that I wrote the book. So I sat him down and said, hey, bud, what kind of questions do you have for mommy? What questions do you have for the world? Of course, some of them just didn't quite work because you always want to be able to come back to that point of love. But one question that he had that I thought worked perfectly was, why do you take pictures? And I think he actually said, why do you take so many pictures? And I took the snark out of the question for the book. So that's actually one question where my son, his question ended up in the book. Why do you take so many pictures? Mommy, why? So we can treasure our memories forever and ever. I think it's just really special. Obviously, the Familias connection and the vision there. But for why, daddy, why, I had a special connection with my daughter as the inspiration for the book. And for why, mommy, why, my son's questions are actually on the page. So it's nice.
The questions that you included in the book are so real and so authentic. I think it's so interesting that you talk about developing this book by going straight to the source and your experiences with your own kids, because that's something that people really love about the book. Because if you're reading this book, you probably have a young child in your life, whether it's a child, grandchild, a special student in your class, and they really do ask these questions sometimes. And they want to know things why we do things that we take for granted, like taking pictures. We take so many pictures, especially on our cell phones, that it's a given. And so to have a child remind us that this is something that's part of their world, but they want to understand why, is such a great perspective. And I think it's so great when we have books like yours that offer a window into the perspective of our kids, because as we grow, we lose sight of that perspective naturally. And so being able to have moments where you see the world through their eyes is beautiful and so, I think, empowering for kids and so great for building those connections together.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for saying that. I love that too. I think there are many good reminders here to just slow down and appreciate these moments that you see on the pages.
So is that something that you were hoping people would take away from the book? Did you, as you were writing and developing and going through this whole process, what did you hope readers would take away from the books?
So that's a really good question. I think when I first started this, I was really just thinking about much more about the format, this kind of question and answer. And we don't see that a lot in books. We see more of a linear story structure. I thought that was fun to play with that structure a little bit differently. But what was really interesting is when I started thinking more deeply about why are questions so important and why do they ask so many questions? And that's when I think things got really interesting for me. And that's what I hope people take away from the book, the celebration of childhood curiosity, especially because, like we said, we're really overstimulated. We're overscheduled as a society. Parents are just so super busy. And I remember when my children were at this age and they would ask lots of questions, I felt this kind of motivation to shut them down and just to say, okay, like now's not the time for questions. Like we're trying to get out the door. We're trying to this, we're trying to that. And sometimes I still do that, but I try to make space for when it might be better to ask these questions. Like maybe let's finish what we're doing and we can talk about this. And so I think that teaches other lessons. But I learned through my research that nobody asks more questions than a 4-year-old, which I'm sure is shocking to everyone who's known a 4-year-old. But I thought that was really interesting. And as I started thinking about questions, I was reminded of my college philosophy classes where we talked about Piaget and cognitive development and how the questioning stage is really between ages 2 and 7. But we have this more advanced questioning stage once they hit 4 years old, which is what we're seeing in this book and in kind of the inspiration behind the book. And the idea that when children reach the age of 4, they're starting to master their ability to communicate. So now they've had all these thoughts and all these questions, but now they can all come out. They can share them all, right? That's when the why questions come and it's more intuitive thinking. And what's really amazing too in the research is that children around that age, that preschool age, might ask 100 questions every day. But by the time they get to middle school, that number just plummets. And it's really interesting to me to be an educator of college students. I start thinking to myself, why does that happen? And so research has been done on it, and there are a lot of factors. Our education system tends to value having the answer rather than asking a good question. Parents sometimes are just overstimulated and they just shut down the questioning. So children learn as they get older, oh, my parents don't want me to ask so many questions. And then there's that kind of social pressure of if you're always the one in the classroom raising your hand and you're elongating the lesson because you have so many questions. And as you get into middle school, that social pressure plays a role as well. For me, I just want to be thinking about always trying to encourage my children to ask good questions. And I had this experience because what I see actually as a college educator is my college students really struggle to ask good questions. They'll email me and say, I don't understand the assignment. And that's difficult to really help them because I don't know what it is that they need. We need to get to a more specific place to really help them. My children, a lot of people have probably experienced this, had a flexible instruction day a couple of weeks ago due to weather. So if you're in an area of the country that gets weather, you probably have had your children at home on your kitchen table on their computers doing class at some point. And I heard my 10-year-old, the one that inspired Why Daddy Why, that asked the most beautiful questions when she was 4, just saying, I don't understand what you want me to do, to the teacher. And that kind of got my hackles up a little bit as a college educator. So she got off and I said, okay, we can't do that. We have to be specific. What do you need? I read the instructions, but I didn't understand them. Okay, what phrase didn't you understand? What is specific? And so the next call that she made back to her teacher was much more specific. And I felt, okay, we're getting somewhere. And we really have to be thinking about that as parents and probably educators too, is how can we encourage students and children to continue to embrace that curiosity and ask really good questions beyond the preschool years, into middle school, into high school, into college. The questions really are the heart of the inquiry and how we learn. So I think that's just important for parents to even model that and say, why exactly are the leaves green? We learn that like in elementary school, right? In science class. And I could throw out some words that I think have something to do with it, but I'm not sure I can really explain the process. But my children actually might be able to explain that process. So I think just celebrating questions and knowledge throughout each day is really what I'm hoping parents will start thinking about with their kids as they read the Why books, which thankfully the series is continuing to grow.
I'm so thrilled to hear you talk about this because you have such a well-rounded perspective as someone who is talking about early childhood theory and the importance of asking questions, but also working with kids at that older stage and seeing how these skills develop and how they're used and how they change. And I think it really all ties together really nicely. In the Why series, the message is laying this foundation of respect and placing value on curiosity and the importance of asking questions and inquiry. Something as simple as listening to your child's questions and answering them with as much patience as you can muster lays the foundation for that confidence and those cognitive and verbal abilities to continue feeling like they can ask questions and continue exploring as they get older. So I think your passion for this really shines through the Why series, and also encouraging parents to be mindful of being present when their kids are asking questions. I know my kids both ask tons of questions, but for some reason, when we're in the car and I'm backing up and really needing to focus on traffic coming in 2 different directions, is the time when I get questions from both of them at the same time. My immediate reaction is to be like, well, hold on a second. Just wait a minute. I can't answer right now. So I started saying to them, can I take a short break from questions right now? And so when I have backed up and safely got into a place where I can focus and think clearly, I'll say, okay, now I'm ready, which I think is also important because it's okay for us as parents and educators to say, I'm here, I'm present, but like, this is my capacity in this moment. So please give me a few moments to get back to full capacity where I can really answer your question. Modeling those boundaries and pauses are also super important. So yeah, this is a really important conversation. You mentioned at the start that the series is continuing. So tell us a little bit more about that and in general, what's coming up next for you.
Oh, so I'm so excited about the grandpa and the grandma book. When I first chose daddy for the first book, I had a lot of people ask me like, you're a woman, why didn't you choose mommy? And I felt like at the time there weren't as many daddy books as mommy books. And I wanted to fill that space because my husband's relationship with our children is so important, really just as important, and in some ways more important than a mom's relationship. And I just love, there are a few grandma and grandpa books, but not a lot. And so I love that. I love that we can celebrate this relationship. My kids adore their grandparents. We had some fun with those questions too. We approached it the same way of exploring some of the similar concepts and maybe a little twist here and there. I love that. In a way, that's funny too. I think that children will ask the same question to their mom and then to their dad and then to their grandma and then to their aunt and then to their siblings. So I think it's funny to just continue some of those questions too. I have that coming up. And it's funny that you mentioned my passion for this aspect of questions. I have really seen as an educator, a lot of struggles for college students. I started teaching college classes in 2006. And we've gone through so much since then, right? So we've had so many technological changes and students have had to adapt to that. And then, of course, we had COVID, which was a huge difficulty for education. And it affected every child from kindergarten up through college. And so what we're seeing now is students that are coming into the college environment might not be quite as prepared. And I love your point about trying to set up boundaries and helping children understand that instant gratification isn't always for them. And they sometimes have to wait for answers and they have to wait for adults, because those are some of the things that I see from students in my college classes where they want certain accommodations that are unreasonable, like perhaps going on a 10-day cruise and during midterms and just wanting to not take their computer with them, even though it's an online class, you can take it anywhere in the world, or wanting to wait until the last week of class to just do all the week of the semester and then turn it in all at once. So there are some things that we're struggling with. And I think that comes from COVID in a lot of ways, because we gave a lot of accommodations to really get through that trauma experience that we were all facing. So I've actually established an Instagram account called Beyond the Syllabus. I haven't actually talked about this anywhere. So it's the first place I'm talking about this, but I established it in December and I share motivation and advice and just realistic tips on what your professors really wish you knew about college classes and how to be successful and how to prepare and what the expectations are and things like that. And I'm working on a nonfiction book proposal for those kinds of concepts. So in terms of what's next, that's what's next for me. And I'm busy with my kids. And I want to talk about that because I don't know that we celebrate that quite enough. There's so many books that I want to write and there's so many ideas that I have and so many things that I could do. I have a dancer who's really pushing herself in competitive dance. She has a dance competition this weekend. I just can't wait to see her there up on stage. And that comes with extra classes and private lessons and all these different things that take up time. And my son is working very passionately in his basketball season right now to earn more playing time and starting time. And I just love seeing him work through those struggles. And then I have two little artists that just want to go to the art place down the street and paint all the time. And I'm just really enjoying them. You only have children for so long. And as much as I'm working on next items for fiction and nonfiction and writing, I just also want to celebrate just my family and the opportunity that I have to just watch them grow and learn and just become better humans.
Thank you so much for saying that. And I love that too. I think that's a bit of a common thread in a lot of our podcast episodes as we talk to people, not just our authors, but our social media influencers, members of our own Familias team, and leaders in various communities. As much as we want to have our own work and find meaning and value in our work and personal projects and our passions, there is that push-pull of where am I investing my time into as a parent and into my family, but also into the things that fulfill me, no matter what that looks like. And it is a real challenge. And I agree with you. We don't talk enough about that. I think it's natural to go to that place of talking about that it's hard, but also really such a great reminder of staying present and being mindful of, like you said, this very short but extremely precious time. And I think the Why series especially is a perfect tool for that, because it is a little snapshot what life is like with that 4-year-old who's asking you those questions constantly, and exactly what it's like to be a parent in that.
The books are great to connect with my kids and celebrate with my kids. For Why Daddy Why, I had my official launch party in my daughter's first grade classroom. And all of the kids had little bear headbands that they had made and colored. And I brought bear cookies, and it was just such a really special moment. And now she's in 4th grade. And I coached her volleyball team, and a lot of the kids, they know me, I know them. And it's really cool because you were the author that came to our class in 1st grade and brought that book. And so now I'm really excited that March 4th, and I know, spoiler alert, we're recording this before the release, but I'm going to have my launch party in my son's kindergarten classroom with all of his friends. And it's just, I think those are really special moments that I want to try to take advantage of throughout this experience and just celebrate it with them.
You have so much to celebrate, and I'm so glad that you have, it sounds like, multiple cheering squads here to celebrate with you, including your family, who are clearly such an inspiration and such a big part of the heart and soul of this book. I want to thank you for sharing that with us and sharing that with our listeners. You have so much going on, so I want to make sure people can get in touch with you. Can you remind everyone how they can get in touch with you, where they can find you online?
Sure. Yeah. My website is tamaragirardi.com, and all of my links are there. So definitely go there. Sign up for the newsletter on my website, because I am developing and sharing educational resources and kind of fun activities like Mad Libs, different things like that associated with the book, so that you can read the book with your kids and then have some fun with these different activities. Those will go out to everyone on my newsletter. I'm primarily active on Instagram and Facebook, and my links are there at the website, tamaragirardi.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. As we conclude today's podcast, I'd like to thank Familias for their support in bringing this podcast to your ears and your heart. We'd be thrilled if you subscribed to the podcast and left us a review. And when you're ready for that next amazing book adventure, we'd be honored if you'd choose a book from Familias. One step at a time, we can make the world a happier place.